Hey, Sarah. So how are you doing today?
Excellent. How are you doing today?
Well, I'm good. It is so nice to talk to you. I know you've got a lot going on in your life. You're planning a big move soon. But thank you very much for coming on Memory Lane. You're the second person to come onto the show. So what I want you to do is, are you driving right now?
I am driving right
So
now.
normally I tell people to close their eyes, but obviously that would be a very bad thing for you to do while driving. So I just want you to just reach back into your memory and think about a time, a place, an event that when you think about it, the memory is so strong, you feel it, you smell it, you taste it, it takes you back there. It can be a good memory, it can be a sad memory, happy, sad, whatever. And so when this comes to you, this situation and this story comes to you, tell us about it.
That's funny because I was planning on telling you something completely different than what just came to my mind when you said that.
Really?
Yeah. My mom's from England, and I grew up going to England every single summer to see my grandparents. And when you said the smell of a memory, this one of the strongest memory senses that I have is smell. And I remember the first time I ever walked into my grandparents' house in England, and it is, I mean, maybe one of the most memorable things I've ever had experience. They live on this little country farm in a house that is probably 250 years old. It's a brick house, and it's beautiful. It's a 150-acre farm, and it is more beautiful than anything you've ever seen. This one-lane country road in the middle of nowhere, south of London, and it's just so picturesque, it almost feels like it shouldn't be real. Every time I go to, I have to blink and remind myself that this is real. I'm actually here.
Take us back to that moment when you first arrived there, when you saw it for the first time. What was your reaction to this place?
Breathtaking. It takes your breath away. You look at this house, and from the road, it looks so tiny. And you come up the drive, and it's a pebble driveway. It's this little tiny house, and then you get alongside of it, and you notice that it's almost like those churches that you see that from the front look really little, and then when you go inside of them are just massive. And you go up to the house, and it's the whole side of it is completely covered in overgrown ivy. And it's a dark red brick house with original doors and original windows, and the glass in the windows is bubbling. It's the panes, the paint on the window panes is cracking, but that doesn't matter because it adds to the character of that house. And you go inside, and it's all original wood floors, and it's just beautiful, and it just smells like an old house, and the floors creak on every single room. The ceilings are slanted. The walls aren't even, but it just has this country feel that just melts you. You feel like you're home. I feel more at home there than I do in my childhood house. I could live there for the rest of my life and be happy. And then you go down the fields, and there's the first field you hit is a sheep field, and there's always, in the springtime, there's little baby sheep there, and the little lambs are hopping around in the field. And then you go into the next field through, and it's just sprawling. It's huge. It's massive. It's like a quilt. When you look at it, every field is like attached to another field, and it's like quilt work almost. And you go into the next field, and that one's called the sloped field. You go into it, and it looks like it's going to be really little. Down. And my sister and I used to roll down the hill, and it would take 2 minutes to get to the bottom of the hill. It was so big. In the summertime, there's bluebells in the woods, and it's just like, it's like a blanket of bluebells. My grandfather used to do barbecues in the woods, which is, probably really dangerous. but whatever. So we used to do barbecues in the woods, and he would put everything up on the trailer and then attach it to the tractor. And he would take all of us out to the fields, my cousins and my aunt and my uncle, and sometimes my parents would be there. And sometimes their neighbors would come. We would go and fly kites in the field and take the dogs with us and spend the day out there. And then we'd come back, and it'd be like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and we'd have spent the entire day out there not even realizing it. These are memories that I'll take with me for the rest of my life.
Do you have a specific memory that stands out that is your favorite or the most vivid?
I think yes. I think my favorite memory of my grandparents' farm is in my bedroom at my grandparents' house. My sister and I used to share a bedroom there. And there were 2 twin beds. And I was like 7 or 8. And I was being rambunctious. And I was sitting on the edge of the bed, jumping up and down, and all of a sudden the bed cracked and it broke. And I had to go tell my grandmother that I broke the bed. And I was really scared to go tell her. But in the end, she just thought it was funny, and now it's one of those stories that we've talked about for years, that I broke the bed jumping up and down on it.
Yeah.
But I just remember being so scared, and my sister was making fun of me, and she's like, "Oh my God, you have to go tell Grammy you broke the bed." And she taunted me for the next 25 minutes until I finally worked up the courage to go tell my grandmother that I broke the bed. She was oblivious. Most of the time, she was just oblivious to the fact that we were being out of control. Some of my fondest memories in my childhood are from the farm.
And when was the last time that you were there?
I was there in August 2012, and things had changed a lot. My grandparents are in their 80s now, so the farm is not kept up like it used to. And everything is kind of disheveled now, falling apart, broken down, overgrown. I was there with my parents for the first time since I was very little. I usually just went by myself. I was there with my parents for the first time in years. And we just spent 2 weeks fixing their farm up and weeding and tearing stuff down and nailing stuff up and just fixing everything. And when we left, my grandparents were more grateful than I've ever seen them. They were happy again to see their farm. They walked around the property. My grandmother walked around the property for the first time in probably 2 years, and she was just very happy to see how good it looked. Hopefully I'll be able to go there more soon, now that I'll be living so much closer.
Mm-hmm. And were you close to any of the animals that lived on the farm?
They had a dog named Sam, and he was a sheepdog, like a herding sheepdog. He was beautiful, black and white, very well-mannered, very tentative, very loyal. He was a very, very loyal dog. He was one of the few dogs I liked growing up. I was not a fan of dogs. I didn't like them. But he followed me everywhere, and we just would go out there and be gone for the day. He was very protective. and very beautiful. He is the only animal I've ever cried over losing. When he passed away, which was just of old age, and he was just a very, very loyal person. I don't know. I've never known another dog that could read behaviors like he could. But I guess that was kind of his job. I actually think about him often. You never want to get too attached to the animals, because you never really know if they're going to be there the next day. They had a cat that used to scratch me a lot. He wasn't very nice. His name was Oliver. He wasn't a very nice cat. I don't have any fond memories of him at all. Oh, they used to have this on a different track. In one of their fields, they had geese off in a side pasture. There was a pond back there that always got covered in, I think it's called duckweed or something like that. And the whole pond would be covered in these little tiny leaves, tiny little leaves all summer long. And my sister and my grandfather made a raft out of oil barrels and wood, and they used to stick me out on it and stick me in the middle of the pond and then leave me there, and I had no way to get back. So I would get stuck out in this pond. Granted, this pond was like 15 feet wide, but nonetheless, I was terrified as a child. I was tormented.
Were you ever attacked by a goose?
Yes, but I always chased after them, so it was my own fault.
Oh.
I instigated it. It was never like I got attacked because I was not doing anything. I always was doing something to get attacked.
Yeah. And so having your grandparents live in the United Kingdom and visiting them, did you ever notice any cultural differences?
Oh, yeah. There's major cultural differences. People think that there's not, because we speak the same language, people think that because we speak the same language, there's not a cultural difference. But there's a major cultural difference. It might be because I spent my majority of my time with older people, they're in their 70s when I was younger, so it could be that. They're very old English. They are very reserved. They don't show a lot of emotion. They're compassionate people, but they're not loving. Like, they have compassion in their hearts, but they don't show it. They show it in their own ways. Like, I've never heard my grandfather tell me he loves me, but I know he does. They are very reserved in, I think part of it has to do with my grandparents grew up in the war. They hold on to everything they've ever had. If a pair of stockings get a run in them, she sews them. She doesn't go get a new pair. She doesn't throw them out and get a new pair. She just sews them. They're thrifty, but it's definitely different cultural-wise, too. Things like if I said thank you, what would you say back to me?
You're welcome.
You're welcome. They don't say you're welcome. They just say, yeah. And I find that I don't say you're welcome because my mother never did.
So that was passed on to you.
People always think I'm rude, but it's not that I'm rude. It's that I never knew to say you're welcome. They'd have to work harder than, and this might offend some people, but they'd have to work harder than, like, I have. Or my parents had to. My grandparents had to work very, very hard for everything they ever had. They grew up on rations. And I don't understand that, but they're not wasteful. And I find that with a lot of people in England. It's not just my older grandparents. A lot of people. They're not wasteful. Things are very expensive there. because a lot of stuff is imported. So stuff is very, very expensive there. So people are a lot more sparing. Like instead of just, oh, I forgot to get something at the grocery store, instead of just running back out, you just make do without it because gasoline's so expensive. Whereas if I forgot, like, sugar at the grocery store, I would just run back out. It's hard to explain, though. Definitely it's hard to explain the cultural differences, but there is a big cultural difference between growing up in the United States and frequently seeing the United Kingdom.
Did they ever share any stories from World War II with you?
Yes. My grandfather is a very, very smart man. He is one of a very small percentage that went to college during the war. And he's a very, very smart man. But he grew up, both my grandparents grew up just poor in Birmingham, which is coal country. It's like the equivalent to Pittsburgh. It's very city, it's very industrial, and there's a lot of poor, and then there's a lot of rich, but there's very little in between. And they both grew up in Birmingham. My grandmother had to leave school at the age of 12, and she worked in a telephone, I don't know, like answering services kind of thing. And she made like 50 cents a week or something. My grandmother had to save up ration tickets to buy the butter for her wedding cake. They always talk about how hard it was and that they've never endured anything as rough as that. They were taught that if you hear a plane, just dive into the bushes that you're next to. Don't wait to see if it's a known plane or if it's an enemy plane. They were just told, just protect yourself. They don't talk often about it because I think it was so hard and they've moved on from it. But they grew up just poor. My great-grandfather was a train engineer, and he drove trains, and he worked on trains, which was a fairly prestigious job at the time, but it didn't pay well. Nothing paid well. So everything for them was very hard. Everything for them was far more difficult than I think you and I could ever fathom.
Yeah.
But it's made them who they are, and it made them work hard, and that's a characteristic that I love seeing in people, especially when they're people our age. Because, yeah, we have to work hard, we have to go to college, but we've never only made 50 cents a week. We've never been as bad. So, and that's, also coming from somebody that grew up in Howard County, but.
So, moving on to the next era, did they ever talk to you about what it was like during the Cold War in Britain?
No, they've never talked about that. I think that they ended up being fairly well off. My grandmother went back and got her high school diploma, and my grandfather became a professor at a university in London. And then they shortly thereafter moved to Philadelphia. My mom was 10 years old when she moved here, and my grandfather worked for the Franklin Mint, so he had a government job. So I think they ended up being fairly well off after they were married and after the war ended. My aunt was born and she's the oldest. My aunt was born, and she had a ration book for the first year of her life. But I think after the war ended and things weren't being rationed and you were able to get a paycheck again, I think they ended up doing really well. And they don't really reflect on those kinds of things because they don't like, I think this is Brits in general, do not like to feel pitied. I think it's, how do I put this? They don't like to feel pitied because I don't think that they like to feel degraded. They're a very, very strong culture of people.
So if they were in Philly, how did they end up back in England?
My grandfather was laid off due to pretty much budget cuts in the 70s. And he had no other choice but to move back to England where he had a job offer from a university to be a professor again. So they took my mom back with them to London, but my grandparents stayed there, and they purchased the farm when my mom was in college. They purchased the farm, and it used to be a concern that they wouldn't be able to take care of it as they got older. But my cousin and her husband live there now, and they're able to take care of them, and they check on them weekly. And they've just lived there since the late 70s. They've lived back in England, and they haven't been to the States in 2 or 3 years. It could be as much as 3 years. My grandmother's very sick at this point, so it's too much for her to travel.
Going back to your grandmother, you said that, you know, she was a war wife, but she did go back and get her high school diploma, correct?
She only wanted to go back to school after she had to leave, and was never given the opportunity by anybody. But when she was given the opportunity once she was married and had her own children, she decided to go back when they moved to Philadelphia, and she got, I guess it's like a GED. I don't know how they did it then, but I guess it's something like a GED. And she said it was completely eye-opening. She never enjoyed school before. She never wanted to go. She didn't appreciate it. But as an adult, she appreciated being able to learn things. She appreciated being taught things. And she had a better grasp on it. She's an intelligent woman. It just took age for her to realize she was as smart as she is.
Yeah. And so for that process, do you actually have to go into a classroom?
I think she took classes. I think she took her classes at a community college to get her high school equivalency. And I think that then it was maybe easier to get that because you actually took classes, whereas now you just read a book and go take tests to go get your GED.
Yeah.
I think she had a new outlook on learning from that point on. She said that she reads a lot, and I read a lot too, and I got that from her. She reads very often, and I asked her one time, have you always read? She said, oh no, I hated reading as a kid. And that's when I found out that she left school at 12 and got her high school diploma as an adult. But as a child, I'm not sure she could have done it as a teenager.
What is her illness?
She's just had a long, hard, stressful, devoted life. I think that it's just, she's just tired. The last time she was in the States, she collapsed and had a stroke and was hospitalized for about a week. And that was the last time that they ever came here. Her body's done repairing itself. But my grandfather is still kicking. He's one of those people you look at and then you just go, oh, he's never going to die.
Yeah.
He's just as feisty as he's ever been.
So, when do you think that you'll be able to return to the farm?
I think I'm going to try and go as often as I can. We move in April to Italy, and the flights from Italy to London are only about a 2.5-hour flight, and they're only about $120.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to try and go once every other month.
Wow, that would be
try.
great.
I've never seen my grandparents more than twice a year in my entire life. And it used to be I saw them once a year. I'm very excited, and they're very excited. My grandfather has, like I said, never told me he loves me, but these are the things that make it known that he does. He called me the other day, and I can't call him because I don't have international, but he can call me and I can answer them. He called me the other day, and he goes, so you're really moving to Italy? And I said, yeah, and I'm moving to Italy in April. I'll be there in April. And then I told him, I got to go. Call me back in like 10 minutes. I have to pick up another phone call. And he calls me back, and he goes, so I looked up flights, and they're only about 120 hours, and they're like a 2.5 to 3 hour flight. So those are the kinds of things, obviously, he's excited about it, because in the 10 minutes that I was off the phone with him, he's gone and looked up flights information. My cousin is excited. She just had a baby last year. He knows us through Skype. He doesn't know us in person. But
so let's finish up here. This has been wonderful, but one more thing I want to ask you is, say in the future the farm passes out of the family and you would not be able to go visit anymore. How would that feel?
Devastating. It would be heartbreaking. A piece of your childhood gone. Sorry. I think it would be very upsetting for a lot of people in the family.
Yeah.
It's just a farm, but it's my grandparents' livelihood. And very, very good memories for everybody. And an opportunity that most people don't have. Like, I've been blessed to have free access to a whole other world whenever I wanted. So it would, it'll happen one day. None of us could afford that. If it doesn't get purchased by somebody in our family and when my grandparents pass away, it'll just be a really fond memory for everybody, I think. But that'll be all it is a good memory.
Thank you. Sarah, I want to thank you so much for being on Memory Lane.
Well, thank you very much for having me.